Welcome to a new episode of Cheaters Always Cheat. Like, subscribe, and share to stay connected.
My day started off like any other day. I woke up early, got myself cleaned up, gave Emily a goodbye kiss while she was still sleeping, and drove to my construction job. But there was something unexpected waiting for me. That normal day turned into something extraordinary. Later in the evening, while I was working at the construction site, I felt my phone buzzing in my pocket. I took it out and saw a message from my neighbor, Mike. It said, "Dustin, your garage door is open." I found it strange because I distinctly remember closing it. I thanked Mike and asked him to close it if he didn't mind. He agreed, and I went back to work. However, I couldn't get the open garage door out of my mind. I didn't know why, but something felt a little strange. Trusting my instincts, I decided to take an early lunch and drove back home. As I got closer to my house, my heart rate started to increase. I saw an unfamiliar car parked in my driveway, a car I had never seen before. At that moment, a sickening feeling washed over me. I parked my truck quietly on the street and approached my own house without making any noise. I opened the side door that led to the garage, and to my surprise, it wasn't locked. The door that led from the garage into the house wasn't locked either. As I walked through the house without wearing my shoes, I stumbled upon the most devastating scene. There was Emily, my wife, in the arms of a stranger. They were kissing, and both of them had hardly any clothes on, right in front of me. I was consumed by anger. Everything seemed blurry, and I felt like I was about to throw up. Stepping back a bit, I took out my phone, made sure the flash was off, and snapped a few pictures of them kissing, and recorded a short video of them together in my house. It was in that moment that I realized seeking revenge wouldn't bring me any satisfaction. The best way to get back at Emily would be to make her fully grasp what she was losing. It was time for a clever plan, one that would allow me to come out of this situation with my dignity intact. After witnessing what I did, I took a moment to catch my breath. I silently walked away from the house, my heart heavy like a lump of lead, but with a plan in mind. I decided to reach out to a friend who was a lawyer. I told him everything that had happened and sought his guidance. Since we lived in North Carolina, I needed some evidence to potentially reduce the amount of alimony I might have to pay. I had the proof, and I showed it to my lawyer friend, even though he wasn't a divorce lawyer. He pointed me in the right direction and helped me understand the necessary steps to protect myself. He provided me with the contact information of a highly regarded divorce lawyer who could assist me. According to him, she was quite skilled. When I met with the divorce lawyer, I didn't waste any time laying out all the details. She explained that North Carolina was a no-fault state, but cheating could impact the alimony payments for the spouse receiving support. We worked on the necessary paperwork for the divorce and discussed our plan going forward. Emily had no clue about what was happening. A few days later, my lawyer and I arranged to meet Emily at a local cafe. She was surprised to see me there, and confusion filled her wide eyes as she asked, "Dustin, what's going on?" I slid the divorce papers across the table, and Emily's expression changed from confusion to shock. Stuttering, she said, "Dustin, I don't understand." Looking at her, my heart aching, I replied, "Emily, I think you do. I saw you with him." Her face turned pale, and I could see the realization sinking in. Tears streamed down her face as she apologized. Despite the pain, I knew my decision was the right one. Eventually, Emily refused to sign the divorce papers. By that time, I had already moved out of our house and found a small apartment for myself. Since the house belonged to Emily's parents, I wasn't concerned about that aspect. The day after she received the divorce papers, her parents offered financial support so she could hire her own lawyer. However, her parents were unaware of why I was divorcing their daughter, and I assumed Emily wouldn't tell them either. So I decided to show Emily's parents the photos and video I took when I caught her with that guy in our home. I mailed a package to them, explaining why I was divorcing their daughter. Around 6 weeks later, during the divorce hearing, her parents didn't show up. My lawyer informed me that she was going to attempt to ask for alimony. She mentioned it was unlikely to succeed, but she wanted to keep me informed after hearing what my wife's attorney said on her behalf. They claimed I wasn't a good provider and had been mentally offensive. In court, my wife kept lying repeatedly. At one point, The judge warned her to ensure the accuracy of her statements, because lying in court could lead to trouble, which she was doing. Fortunately, we presented the evidence to the judge, and he granted me the divorce without awarding her any alimony. The judge gave me exactly 30 days to retrieve the remainder of my belongings from the house. I only had a couple of boxes left to collect. About 3 months after the divorce, I made arrangements to retrieve my things. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed the same car that I saw that day parked there. Seeing his car initially stung, but the feeling quickly faded. This time, the garage door was deliberately left open so that I could collect my belongings. One day, I received a message from Emily asking to meet up. I agreed, curious about what she wanted. We met at the same cafe where I had given her the divorce papers. She looked different, not the confident and happy woman she used to be, but a mere shadow of her former self. She started talking, sharing how life had been for her, expressing regret for her choices, and confessing how much she missed me. However, I felt distant and unaffected by her words. I listened quietly until she finished. Then, I looked at her and said, "Emily, I wish you all the best, but that chapter of my life is over." Even after expressing my finality, she continued to try and persuade me. She wanted us to reconcile and claimed she had ended things with the other guy. As I walked away from the cafe, I realized I had emerged victorious. Not because Emily was regretful or unhappy, but because I had found happiness within myself. I had turned my life around, discovered my inner strength, and moved forward. I started rebuilding my life, one piece at a time. The ultimate revenge wasn't about fighting or causing a scandal. It was about me progressing in life with greater strength and wisdom. About 7 months later, Emily's father passed away. He never apologized for his initial anger towards me when he learned about the divorce, but her mother did apologize and invited me to attend the funeral. I almost didn't go, but I didn't have any issues with her mom. I wasn't the type of person to hold grudges. What's done is done. As the weeks went by, there were rumors circulating that Emily was getting into more trouble with the law. One weekend, she got arrested for a DUI. Her new boyfriend is offensive and involved in dealing pills from her mom's house. How do I know all this? Well, her mom still reaches out to me from time to time. Oh, we were only married for 8 years, so she could have potentially received alimony, maybe for about half the duration of our marriage. But she cheated, and it had an impact on the final outcome. Second story. So I'm 31 and I met my girlfriend Karen, who is 29, around 5 years ago. She had just left her offensive boyfriend and moved back in with her parents along with her small child. Her ex got her pregnant during her senior year of college, and he was both cheating on her until she finally had the strength to leave him. It was through one of her sorority sisters named Angie, who happens to be married to my friend Dave, that we got introduced. Karen and I hit it off and started dating, and eventually, she and her son Bobby moved in with me. The initial years together were wonderful. I encouraged her to go back and complete her college degree, and my dad helped her secure a job at his workplace. However, about 1.5 years ago, Karen reconnected with some of her sorority sisters, and they began having girls' nights out every other Saturday. She also started going out for drinks with her co-workers occasionally after work. When I expressed my concerns about it, she became defensive, and we ended up arguing about the situation. Angie informed her husband Dave that Karen was flirting a lot during their outings, to the extent that it started bothering Angie. Dave gave me a heads up about it. So during one of their girls' nights, I decided to show up at the bar and found Karen flirting and letting some guy touch her. I walked over and politely asked the guy to remove his hand from my girlfriend, then told Karen it was time to leave. The drive back home was tense, and we ended up fighting. As a result, she ended up sleeping on the couch that night. The next morning, she apologized and admitted that she had too much to drink and got carried away. However, I made it clear that her apology wasn't enough. If we were going to stay together, we needed to attend counseling together and work through these issues. It was clear that the girls' nights out would have to be put on hold for a while, and we started making progress as we worked on our relationship. About 2 months ago, I began noticing some suspicious behavior from Karen. She became overly protective of her phone, always leaving the room when using it. I tried talking to her about it, but she was evasive and denied that anything was wrong. I confided in Angie and Dave about my suspicions, and finally, Angie revealed that Karen had been talking to an old boyfriend from college, and they had been flirting. When Angie confronted Karen about it, she argued that as long as she could keep both of us happy and I didn't find out, there wouldn't be any harm done. Karen mentioned that I was a great provider and great with Bobby, and she didn't want to lose that, but she felt the need for more. Needless to say, this revelation was devastating. According to Angie, the old boyfriend lived in Houston, so their interactions were purely long-distance flirting and nothing physical occurred. One of Karen's sorority sisters invited her to be a bridesmaid at her wedding, and we had made plans to attend. However, Bobby, our son, developed an ear condition and needed to have tubes installed, so he couldn't fly with us. I volunteered to stay back and take care of him while Karen went to the wedding. The wedding festivities spanned 3 days, including a rehearsal dinner, bachelorette party, bridal shower, and the main event. After the rehearsal dinner, Dave, my friend and Angie's husband, called to inform me that Karen's ex-boyfriend had unexpectedly shown up, and they were spending time together, being very indiscreet. He even sent me a couple of photos and a short video showing them making out at the hotel. I immediately contacted Karen's father and asked if he could look after Bobby so that I could drive down for the wedding. I dropped off Bobby at her father's place while leaving town. It was a tiring and lengthy 6-hour drive, and I finally arrived late in the evening. When I reached Karen's hotel room, I could hear laughter coming from inside. I knocked on the door, and after the third knock, Karen opened the door wearing a robe. As I entered, I noticed a guy without clothes in her bed. I introduced myself to him and advised him to leave promptly. Then, I turned to Karen, who was undressed beneath the robe, and demanded an explanation. She became angry, started making excuses, and then began accusing me. At that point, I had had enough. I told her we were done. I made it clear that I was leaving, and if she chose to return, she could gather her belongings and leave my life. As I walked back into the hallway, I noticed there were about a dozen people present, including Angie. We hadn't closed the door to the room, and considering how loud our argument was, I'm sure we put on quite a show for them. I drove back home and arrived around sunrise, completely exhausted. I crashed hard and fell asleep. Edit. The following morning, I began packing up all of her clothes. However, when I reached her lingerie drawer, which contained all the items we had purchased together, I decided to put all of that in a separate box, along with her party and club outfits, and I sent it off to Goodwill. A couple of days later, when she returned from her trip, she called me from the airport. However, her number was still blocked, so she had to take an Uber home. Upon entering the house, she found over a dozen boxes sitting in the living room, containing all of her and Bobby's belongings, ready to go. I informed her that Bobby was at her parents' house, and she could call her dad to help transport the rest of her stuff to his place, or wherever she planned on staying. She attempted to talk her way out of it, but I wasn't interested in hearing her stories. To clarify the situation, the man Karen was seen with at the wedding was not her ex-boyfriend or Bobby's father. He was just someone she had dated during college. It's important to note that Karen was involved in a highly offensive relationship with Bobby's father, which led to multiple visits to the emergency room. The last time, Angie had actually driven her to the hospital, so this information is not based on hearsay. However, regarding the cheating aspect, neither Angie nor I have any evidence to support it. It's solely based on Karen's account of the situation. Third story. Like many people, I got married when I was just 20 years old because I anticipated the benefits of a military salary and allowances like BAS for married individuals. I had known the girl for about a year, and we had been living together for a few months. Looking back, the decision to get married was more or less pressured onto me by her and her mother. Despite my family's opposition, I couldn't be talked out of it. We had our wedding in April, a small ceremony, and a brief honeymoon just a few hours away. After returning, we continued with our usual life. At that time, I was focused on trying to join the military. However, during my first visit to Military Entrance Processing Station, I failed a hearing test and was disqualified. After 3 attempts, they informed me that I wouldn't be able to obtain a waiver, so I wouldn't be able to enlist. When I came home and explained the situation to her, she pretended to be supportive and talked a lot about our future. However, over the next couple of weeks, she became increasingly distant. She would avoid answering questions and frequently left to stay with her mom for several days each week. Feeling suspicious, I eventually decided to check her phone. The first text conversation I came across was with her friend, an army wife on her second husband. They were discussing the most affordable way to get a divorce. As I scrolled through the messages, I discovered that this conversation had been going on since I returned from MEPS. I confronted her about it, but she denied everything and left to stay at her mom's place without specifying how long she would be gone. Later, I received a call from her mom informing me that she wanted a divorce and would come to collect her car and belongings. It finally hit me hard that I had been used the entire time by someone who was nothing more than a predatory piece of trash. I was devastated by this realization. On a positive note, I dodged a major bullet with this one. About 6 weeks later, she got pregnant by a mutual friend whom she had been having an affair with all along. She tried to spread rumors about me in my hometown, falsely claiming that she left because I was using pills and verbally mistreating her. The truth is, I was sober and clean due to my efforts to join the military, not even touching alcohol. I called her out on her lies and warned her that if she wanted to play this game, I could expose the truth about her, which would do far more damage. That was the last thing I said to her. Now, there's this other story. I had recently ended a long-term relationship and had been single for a few months. I was starting to feel better and moving on from that situation. I met this cool girl who happened to be friends with some of the same people I knew. We hung out a few times, and one night, after consuming quite a bit of alcohol, I woke up in her bed. And well, we did our thing, you know. I ended up spending a lot of time with this girl, and we had a great time together because she is a really cool person. However, there's a difference between being a cool person and being a terrible partner. One night, as we were falling asleep next to each other, she was already dozing off and rolled over. I said, "Sweet dream," to which she responded, "Good night, Rob." Basically, she called me by another guy's name. A little while later, I quietly slipped out of bed, grabbed her phone from the nightstand, and went into the bathroom. I sat down and started going through her messages. It turned out that in just the past week, she had been sending naked pictures to 3 other guys. I continued reading more of the messages, and just as I had seen enough, the phone started vibrating. It was the same name she had called me in her sleep, and it was the same number from the messages. I answered the phone, and immediately the guy on the other end told me that I should probably get checked because he thought she might have given me something. I hung up, packed her belongings while she was still asleep, and let her continue sleeping. When she woke up, I was calmly having my coffee, and I told her it was over. I asked if she needed a ride home and remained polite about it. I explained how she got caught. She got angry that I went through her phone, but honestly, who cares about her opinion, right? I drove her back home and that was the end of it. P.S. One final thing to mention. The guy who called that night actually reached out to me a couple of months later. He confessed that what he said about getting tested was a complete lie. He just wanted to mess with me. He explained that he had asked many of our mutual friends about me. They informed him that I had only recently met her and had no idea that they had been dating or engaged for quite some time. Not sure why nobody told me, but whatever. He apologized, and surprisingly, we have become really good friends over the past few years. In fact, he's one of my current roommates. It's funny how a strong friendship and trust can be built upon the shared knowledge that a certain girl is a terrible person. Fourth story. Alright, here's the story. I was in a relationship with her for a year. She was adventurous in bed and always wanted to do it 3 or more times a day. We both lived in the same neighborhood and were in our late teens. She stayed at her aunt's place, along with her aunt's child and a friend. One day, I decided to surprise her by stopping by her house, just like I had done many times before. Her aunt answered the door and told me she wasn't there, but insisted that I wait. It seemed strange, but we were all close, so I stayed and had dinner while I waited. Suddenly, we heard a car pulling into the driveway. Her aunt turned to me and said, "Go greet her in the driveway." As I walked up to the car, I noticed she was with some guy who quickly got out and sped away. My curiosity piqued at that moment. Why did her aunt ask me to stay that day? I honestly believe she wanted me to find out. We went into the basement for some privacy to have a conversation. She confessed that she had been cheating on me for a while, but claimed it was only BJ. In an attempt to make it seem less serious, she called the guy on speakerphone and said, "You know what we did was nothing serious, right?" He laughed and replied, "Fine by me." I simply couldn't accept that as a justification. To me, it was even worse. I told her that we were finished. At this point, we were both yelling. As I was leaving the house, her aunt pulled me aside and said, "I'm truly sorry about all of this." I gave her a hug and reassured her that I held no grudge against her or her family. The next day, I was still hurt and angry about what happened. So I decided to create posters and hang them up around her school to inform any potential future boyfriends about her actions. When the weekend came, I received a text from the aunt that said, "Please come over. We need to talk." I thought to myself, well, damn, I know I shouldn't have done that. But out of respect for her, I went to their place. To my surprise, it turned out that the whole time my ex and I were close, she would share all the details with her aunt, which made her aunt curious. Her aunt straightforwardly asked me, "Want some hookup?" I was confused and wondered if it meant something different to her. So I asked, "What do you think that means?" She replied, "Everything you want." Well, it didn't take me much time to accept her proposition. As we are getting into the nitty-gritty, guess who comes home? My ex. The door was closed, so I asked if we should stop. Her response? Heck no. We continued, and I must say, I gave it my all, delivering what might be my finest performance yet. The screams were so intense that I can still vividly remember them to this day. Oh, and in case you're wondering, the kid was at a friend's place during all this. After she left the room, I overheard my ex expressing her admiration for the encounter. I couldn't contain my excitement, so I quickly rushed out of the room and approached her aunt from behind. I passionately kissed the back of her neck and exclaimed that it was the most incredible experience I've ever had. However, this seemed to have a profound effect on her aunt, as she broke down in tears and hastily left. As for me, I returned home and began a friends with benefits relationship with the aunt. She was a stunning woman, 10 years older than me, and I couldn't help but feel like I was on top of the world. The ex eventually decided to move back up north with her family. She had initially come to the city to pursue a career in modeling or commercial acting, following in the footsteps of her aunt. However, she couldn't bear staying in the same house while listening to our activities. As for the aunt, she later found a wealthy man in his 50s, got into a relationship with him, and eventually got married. I'm genuinely happy for her, although we haven't had any contact since then. I hope...
Don't forget to click the little bell icon as you like. And subscribe for more. Thanks.